All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Hopefully we'll have a little time at the end for some questions and answers and to talk about what I brought. But my name is Linda Case, and I've been a master gardener for going on 12 years. I work primarily at the Phil Hardberger Children's Garden. That's kind of where my heart is. But last September, I was lucky to be one of 2 Bexar County Master Gardeners selected to go to the Dallas area and take advanced training in growing and using herbs. And I've always had a fascination with herbs. And I thought this was such a great chance to get some formal training. You know, like everybody else, I've always grown my culinary herbs. You know, I've rosemary, sage, parsley, and thyme. You got to have those. And my dad was Italian, so I have to have basil all the time. But getting this training allowed me to move into other areas of the use of herbs. We had 30 hours of very extensive teaching, classroom teaching. And the one area that I came away still having questions about was herbal teas. So I sort of made that my study when I came back. I wanted to learn about using herbs for herbal teas. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about actually growing a tea garden. When I first said I would do this, I called it just growing a tea garden. And apparently some people thought I was going to talk about growing tea in your backyard, green tea, white tea, black tea, but I'm not. I'm going to talk about some very common and easily grown herbs that you can turn into infusions. And we're going to talk about what herbs are used for which infusions, how to make a good one, and so forth. And by the way, I'm a person of great enthusiasms. So when I started my tea garden, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just did it. And I'm going to try to save y'all a few steps today. Okay, so why would we even bother to grow a tea garden? Well, the use of herbal infusions goes back to the beginning of time. We actually have recipes that were recorded on clay tablets that were uncovered in Sumerian archaeological digs. We have recipes that have come out of the Egyptian civilizations, the Greek civilizations, and as much as I hate to say this, my own Roman ancestors borrowed all the Greeks' data and made it their own. We even know that as far back as the Neanderthals, they were gathering and using herbs for all kinds of purposes. And we have no reason to doubt that they weren't making tea with their herbs. So this is a long and honorable practice. If you go to India or you go to China, they have an entire section of their medical system devoted to curing ailments with herbs. We're finding scientifically that more and more of it is absolutely valid. Okay, herbal infusions have positive effects on a number of conditions. I'm an Anglophile. I'm always reading English novels, and I follow English news sites, and I read a lot of the things put out by their National Health Institute. And one of the bulletins that came out this summer was talking about the spike in antibiotic-resistant bacteria and viruses, and it was followed by a paper on how highly antibacterial and antiviral many herbs were. So since we're looking at an increase in bugs that don't respond to chemical medications, the National Institute of Health is saying, folks, we need to step back and look at our herbal infusions. So I see a big, well, how can you say a big future? I see a return to knowledge we've had in prior generations. Growing herbs, if you've got herbs, man, I mean, I walk out in the afternoon. If I want a pot of tea, I go into my backyard, I pick a few herbs, and I make my pot of tea. They're always flavorful. I know the conditions they were grown in, and I know for 100% for sure that there are no pesticides used in the herbs I'm growing, and I see that as a big benefit. And besides, it's just fun. I like to get up in the morning and wander through my herb garden, speak encouragingly to baby plants. Right now, I have 2 baby stevia plants that I'm sitting here fighting over because I didn't water them this morning, and it's hot outside, and one of my babies are wilting while I'm sitting here talking. So herbs are just fun. Herbs for teas. These are very, very common herbs. I have examples of almost all of them up here. They're easy to grow. You can grow them here in Texas. They don't like a lot of water. The only one, I don't even see one on there that you couldn't grow in your backyard. So these are your most common herb teas. Okay, let's see. Ah, yes, and the queen of all tea herbs, known as holy basil, is Tulsi. Tulsi was new to me this year. I could not find plants in San Antonio in the spring, so I did what all good master gardeners do. I ordered myself some seeds, and I've grown 2 different kinds of Tulsi in my tea garden. This is red Tulsi. I have green Tulsi in my garden. I just, for some reason, I didn't bring any. Tulsi, the use of Tulsi, there are entire medical practices in India based on this herb alone. This is a form of basil. It has the most amazing effects. You start drinking Tulsi and you feel both energized and calmed at the same time. And I'm speaking from personal experience, and you can also back that up with scientific data. If you know somebody who's a practitioner of yoga, really believes yoga, they'll tell you all about Tulsi and the effects of making your tea with Tulsi. And obviously easy to grow. I just, put these in a pot in my backyard, and they're coming up and doing just fine. About the size of a basil plant. And the beautiful thing about Tulsi that I've discovered this summer, because truly I knew nothing about it at the beginning of the spring when I decided to grow it, is the more you pick it, the better it grows. It comes out again from the bottom. So you take your top leaves off to make your pot of tea, and the next morning you have 3 new shoots coming out the bottom. It's just a lovely, lovely, lovely plant. Okay. Any other questions about Tulsi? We'll come back to Tulsi in a little bit. Okay, how to grow a tea garden. You don't do what I did. Like I said, I just went into it willy-nilly. I went outside to see what I had, and I thought about what I could grow and just started putting stuff in. I would highly suggest you decide why you're growing a tea garden. What are you looking for? Different herb combinations, different herbs give people different effects, like the Tulsi being both invigorating and calming at the same time. Hyssop. A lot of us right now are coughing and sniffling, and I'm the worst of that right now. Hyssop has, since the beginning of time, been used to treat coughs fairly effectively. So maybe you have allergies and you don't want to take a pharmaceutical cough syrup. You probably want hyssop in your garden. Hyssop is a lovely plant. It's easy to grow from seed. It reseeds itself. It has a lovely little purple flower, and the seeds drop down in the pot, and it comes back again next year. So think long and hard about what it is you're wanting to grow. Most of us have a limited area to grow our herbs. My herb garden has gotten so out of hand that we added 2 new planters early summer, because I kept saying, but I need room for this and I need room for that. But you don't have to do that, folks. You can narrow your focus. Research your herbs. Mints are invasive, right? We all love mint, but mint will take over your garden. So how are you going to grow your mint and control it? I have all my mints grown in big terracotta, or not big, but in glazed terracotta pots, and then I sink that pot into the planter with the rest of my herbs so that they all get watered, but they can't get away from me. So think about things like how much space you have, what the sun is in your garden, things like that. Research your herbs, know which ones you want to grow. Plan your garden. Oh, that's a funny word break. When you're master gardeners, you know that location is everything when you're gardening. But what you need to find out is how much sun do these herbs need. Some of them want full burning down South Texas sun. Many of them, and I'm going to emphasize that, many of them do not. I've had to move many of my plants this summer because I put them in what was full sun this spring, and the full sun this summer has been too hard for them. So know your garden area. Then build your garden. We're going to get to that in a minute, and plant your garden. And we're going to talk about that as well. I'm so sorry. That's okay. All right. These are the 5 big categories that you can address very easily with your herbal teas. Are you looking for something that will calm you down? I am currently the caretaker for 7 dogs. 4 of them are the size of Shetland ponies, and I need calming frequently. So I lean pretty heavily on the calming herbs. Sleep inducing, you have a hard time sleeping at night, you can make a tea that will help you sleep at night. Fatigue fighting, who's not fighting fatigue? Immune boosting, absolutely. And every one of these herbs up here that I have on display is full of antioxidants and vitamins and all kinds of good things. And then medicinal. Now, I'm not going to talk about medicinal because when I took my herb training, this is the truth. They made us 3 times a day stand up and repeat an oath that we would not practice medicine with our herbs, nor would we give medical advice using what we learned about herbs. So if you're interested in going into the medicinal purposes of herbal tea, you're kind of on your own on that one. Sleep inducing. So here are your 4 major herbs. If you wanted to make a tisane at night, tisane is an infusion or a tea that would help you go to sleep. These were the herbs that you are wanting to grow. Echinacea, by the way, is coneflower. They're the 2 of the same plant. This is an orange coneflower just because I thought it was pretty. You're technically supposed to use the pink, the traditional, the default color of the echinacea for your herbal preparations. All parts of the plant, stem, leaf, petals, roots, can be used to make teas. I'm going to be talking today largely about using petals and leaves, but all parts of the echinacea plant are useful for teas, very high in antioxidants, vitamin C as well. Useful plant, and it's really pretty. Lavender, well, we all know about lavender. Lavender oil, infused oil, which is super easy to make, is a staple at my house. If I'm having a hard time sleeping, which isn't very often, I have to admit I'm a very good sleeper, a couple drops of that on a pillow, and you just sort of go off into la la land. And if you like the flavor of lavender in foods and things, you can certainly use it in your herbal teas. Chamomile, this has been used since the dawn of time to relax and to unwind. I have a hard time growing it. And I think I put it, it said full sun. Duh, Linda, they didn't mean Texas sun. I put it in full sun and it fried. I waited too long, I dug it up, moved it into a better place. One plant made it, one did not. So lesson learned there. If it doesn't reseed itself, if I have to replant it again in the spring, it will not be in full South Texas sun. There's a reason it's called German chamomile. I went to school in Germany, and it was dumb of somebody who'd lived in Germany for a number of years to think I could plant that plant in Texas sun. Lemon balm. Years ago, I planted lemon balm in my backyard. I don't know why. I wasn't into herbs at the time, but I was looking for a good hardy plant that would keep coming back. I now have lemon balm all over my backyard. It reseeds itself freely. It's a very attractive plant, and it makes one of the best herbal teas I've ever had. So lemon balm, I highly recommend. Once you get it started, you can just kind of forget about it, and it'll take care of itself. Kind of the perfect plant. Calming herbs, there it is again at the head of the list, holy basil, Tulsi. This is your queen. Purple passion flower. Purple passion flower is wonderful for our part of Texas. Once you get it started, you'll never get rid of it. You'll spend most of your life pulling up purple passion flower vines that are coming up where you don't want them. But they have a lot of benefits. One is that you can use them for your herb, your teas. The other is they bring lots of pollinators into your yard. That will help your other herbs along. And also, they're one of the most beautifully exotic flowers, I think, that we can grow in our own gardens, not to mention the fact that they smell good. There's lavender again. Lavender can be grown in this part of Texas. It's kind of like rosemary. It doesn't want you to fuss over it. I tend to kill mine because I overwater them, but they really sort of prefer to be left alone. There are some new lavender varieties on the market right now that were bred for Texas, so you might be looking for that if you want to grow your own lavender. When you're growing lavender to use, you use only the flowers. That's another thing I figured, you know, I'm a master gardener. I know everything. I was trying to use the leaves. No, not so much. No, stick with the flowers. Again, chamomile, and of course, mint. And mint, once you get it started, especially just the regular mint, like this, it's going to go on forever. You never have to replant or, you know, it's just a good old plant. Fatigue fighting. Red hibiscus, holy basil, ginseng, sage, peppermint, and rosemary. I have the red tea hibiscus growing in my yard right now. I was hoping it would be blossoming so that I could bring some examples to you. It literally, the flowers are literally the color that you see in the illustration. If you've traveled much in Mexico, you'll know that the red hibiscus tea, you'll get it, you're served everywhere. It has a sharp lemony flavor to it, has wonderful properties of antioxidants, gives you a little bit of energy if you're going strong. Tulsi, the holy basil again. Ginseng is a root. I don't think we can grow it here. I just put that in because you see it in so many commercial preparations. If you start reading the ingredients, you'll see they're using ginseng. Sage, once you get sage started in your garden, boy, it's a power plant. It has beautiful blue flowers on it. It attracts pollinators. You can have fresh sage for all your cooking, and it lasts forever, literally forever. Again, peppermint and then rosemary. Rosemary does very, very well in our area, but don't baby it. This is one plant that truly wants full sun, and water it about, I don't know, I kill mine. Again, I overwater them. So I have tried to train myself to water maybe only every 2 or 3 weeks. It doesn't want to be watered. Okay. Immune boosting. We all need this. And again, nothing there that you haven't seen on other lists except possibly the rose hips. These are rose hips that I cut yesterday from my plants. I need to do more research on this. I'm not at all sure whether you need to gather your rose hips from a specific rose or if you can use them from any rose, but I'm going to go with the assumption that you can use the hips of any rose that actually sets hips. They don't all do that. These are not ripe. If they were ripe and ready to use, they would be bright red. And last night when I was going through all of this, I suddenly realized I didn't know what to do with them, even if I had them. So I did some quick reading, and what you do with rose hips is you harvest them when they're bright red, you let them dry thoroughly, and then you crush them like with a mortar and pestle, or I guess you could use a food processor or something like that, and then you're supposed to put it through a fairly fine sieve because there are some little seeds or something that you don't want to use in your teas. So I'll have to report back to you on rose hips when I know a little bit more about how to use them. But I will tell you, this is one of the greatest sources of natural vitamin C in the world. And all the roses I have growing in my backyard, with the exception of one hybrid rose, are setting hips. So I'm going to also assume that you can use them from any rose plant that you have. Again, if you start looking at herbal tea preparations like at World Market, you're going to see rose hips mentioned a lot. They're very, very good for you. Lemongrass. This is my first attempt to grow lemongrass, and it's doing very well. Again, I put it in a terracotta glazed pot, and I sunk the pot into my herb planters, partly because, did you know dogs like lemongrass? Every time I planted lemongrass, my dogs ate it. So I never got to the point where I could actually use some. And this is my first harvest of my own lemongrass. Again, you have that nice citrusy, sharp flavor and a very good source of antioxidants and vitamins. And you can cook with the leaves too. Any questions so far on these? Okay. Now, I'm not going to say much about medicinal herbs except to say medicinal preparations have been made since the beginning of time. Many people swear by them, and I would, if you're wanting to use herbs for medicinal purposes, I would strongly encourage you to do your research on them. I do know that after discovering yesterday about hyssop being a traditional treatment for coughs, I'm going to be using this, and I'm going to consider that a medicinal purpose. I'm tired of coughing. Other than that, everything is pretty much what you would expect. The catnip was new to me. I did not know that humans use catnip, but apparently we do, and apparently it has many medicinal properties. When I'm making teas, and maybe it's just me. We're going to talk about this in a minute too. I don't really like the savory herbs in my teas, like basil, sweet basil. I don't like that in teas. I don't really care for thyme, but parsley is nice. Parsley will give your herbal tea a little peppery, little bite after you've had your tea. And it is, again, very, very high in antioxidants and things of that nature. So these are the medicinal herbs you could grow in your backyard. About fennel, if you're going to plant fennel, plant twice as much as you need because caterpillars adore fennel. So you have to have one for them to strip and one for you to use in your teas. Okay, research your herbs. Again, sunshade requirements. Some herb plants, if you like lavender, if you plant it in the shade, you're not going to get any flowers. You'll have a healthy lavender plant. I have one that lived to be about 15 years old, never, ever bloomed because I didn't have it in enough sun. But then again, here comes that conundrum, that question about Texas sun versus sun in other parts of the world. If you can arrange it, put your herbs where they get full morning sun, but by noon, 1 o'clock, they're moving into a little bit of shade. They seem to do very, very well with that kind of sunlight here in Texas. Water requirements, most herbs don't want very much water. You can kill more herbs overwatering than you can underwatering them, but you have to know the difference. You have to know which ones want their water, which do not. The hibiscus, I have found, wants its water. And it's if it doesn't get its water, it just wilts and falls over. I mean, it's a very dramatic plant. It's like, oh, she didn't water today, fall over. They do come back once you've watered them again, but hey. Climate preferences, I think my problem with chamomile has to do with the fact that it would rather be in Germany than in Texas, but I will persevere. Eventually, maybe I'll figure it out. If I don't figure it out, it can be bought. Now, toxicity. A lot of people I know are reluctant to play around with plants for ingesting them. Do your research. And an example of that is the plant rue, R-U-E. I bought a rue plant after the last Master Gardener plant sale. It was one of the orphan plants that was left. And it looked pathetic, and I thought I would take it home and nurse it back to health, which I did. And then I thought to myself, this is a beautiful plant. What do I do with it? And I started researching it only to find out it's extremely toxic, that it is used in many very traditional herbal preparations, but modern medicine is telling us it is best not to take it internally. So I really would encourage you not to use anything just on what I'm saying up here. Look it up for yourself. I know chamomile interacts with some medications, doctor type medications, so do your research on that. Don't just go on my word. How are you going to get your herbs? Cuttings, sets, seeds, everything. Every herb I've ever tried is easy to propagate. I haven't had one yet that I couldn't propagate, throw a few seeds in the ground, or the lemon verbena, the one that I stressed over so much this spring. Every time I take a cutting from lemon verbena, you can just take a cutting, dip it in your rooting hormone, and put it in a good starting medium, and you'll have a lemon verbena tree almost immediately. They root very, very readily. So that's up to you. Most herbs are not hybrids, so you don't have that problem about, well, is it going to be true to the parent, or is it going to come out being something else? Most of them are what they have been for thousands of years. So try your cuttings. Seeds are cheap, and they're often a pretty good source of herbs. The HEB plants are good. Rainbow has good herbs. So if you're like me and you want it now, you want to see what that garden's going to look like, buying settings are just as good. Plan your garden. Again, it comes down to light. Okay, your herbs, with some exceptions, really aren't going to be able to take this South Texas sun. Shade, some of them are not going to grow in full shade, or like lavender, they'll grow, but you won't get the flowers if you need the flowers. I've had really good luck with dappled light on my herbs. My backyard, I have like 20 oak trees, so it's sunlight, full sunlight is a premium for my garden. So I just put them where I can find a little patch of sun, and if that doesn't work, I move them again. This is not a finite activity. You're going to have to shift things around, take some notes before you find which plants and where to put your plants. Containers, raised beds, or in the ground, it does not matter. One of the beauties of herbs is you can grow them in any container that you can find as long as it has drainage and you get enough soil for you to get a good, healthy root system. Plays well with others. I put that in because I put thyme in my herb planter with parsley, and that was a disaster. Parsley wanted water, and the thyme was going, ew, don't do that. So you have to know who goes with what, okay? Because I wouldn't put thyme and basil together. They just wouldn't like it very much. There are actually charts that can tell you which plants work better with each other. Okay, build your garden. The most important thing to remember about growing herbs for any purpose is they're essentially weeds. If you have traveled in Greece or Spain or Italy and you're going down a highway and you look in a ditch, there are herbs growing there. There's basil growing there. There's oregano growing there. They are weeds, and they really quite thrive being treated as weeds. They want poor soil. They prefer a gritty texture to the soil. And by all means, they want good drainage. I think I lost my other pot of Tulsi. We had that heavy rain, and I didn't get right out there to drain the plant trays they were in, and I think it drowned, essentially. So drainage is absolutely and totally essential. A good growing medium, I use Miracle-Gro. I'm not touting Miracle-Gro. I use it because it's readily available and it's consistent. And I can go to Costco at the beginning of every spring and buy 9 bags at a time and bring them home so I have an ample supply. To your growing medium, you're going to want to add perlite, vermiculite, or something called expanded shale. I had never heard of expanded shale until I did the herb training, and it's literally Texas shale. It's manufactured here in the great state that they place in an oven at a very high temperature until it explodes into little fragments, little sharp fragments, and it provides probably the best textured soil for herbs that I know of. Everything that I've planted using the expanded shale has thrived. I got mine from the Nectar Bar, Drake's, I don't know Drake's last name. She has cactuses and succulents and things. She's over off, well, you can tell I have no sense of direction either. Anyway, expanded shale. You can get it in Amazon. You can get it at various plant centers. I just think it's a wonderful thing to have around. It's not expensive. The resulting soil should be loose and fluffy. I'll pass this around and you can look at it. It's pretty sodden with water right now, but you can actually see the additives I put in. This is a starting mix to begin with. I always use a starting mix if I'm propagating. This is a spoma starting mix, and then I added vermiculite or perlite to it so that it would be nice and fluffy. My herbs don't like compacted soil. You need 8 to 12 inches of growing depth, but that's it. This, of course, we all know this, we're master gardeners. If you're going to plant something, make sure your baby plant is very moist and make sure the pot you're putting it in is moist. Because if one or the other is dry, the moisture is going to get wicked away and your baby plant isn't going to get off to a good start. Water well at first, just to make sure that those baby plants are getting their roots down. And then after that, water according to each individual plant's needs. The stevia plants that I'm trying to keep alive right now, once they're established, aren't going to need a great deal of water, but they're babies right now, and they came in the mail in July in Texas, so I'm having to keep them fairly damp right now just to keep them alive. I love that picture. Herbs don't need to be fed. They don't want to be fed. They kind of want to be left alone, mostly. Remember, when your ancestors started out in a ditch, nobody came along and fed you, okay? So you don't really have to. Now, I have to admit that if I'm outside and I'm feeding plants and I walk by my mint, I might throw a handle full of Rose Glow or whatever I'm working with in just because it's a good plant and I want to encourage it. But you don't really need to feed your plants. The other nice thing about herbs is they aren't susceptible to insect damage. I live in a part of Texas where we have more white-tailed deer than we have people in my neighborhood. Deer don't even like herbs. They won't eat mint and things like that. So the beauty of herbs is you don't need to spray them with anything because the insects, other than things like the caterpillars eating your fennel, that we want. But most of the time you can go out and pick your tea leaves and they're totally, and there's no insect damage to be seen. Now, as a side note, just this week, one of the news sites I read had a full report about tea companies. Some of them names you would recognize immediately, and the high levels of pesticides they're finding in their packaged tea products. And so if you're wanting to avoid that, grow your own. Okay, what did I do wrong? Okay, now plant your garden. Number one, there's that rule again. Never put a dry plant in a dry hole. Make sure both the hole and the plant are wet. Young plants, going to need maybe a little extra care for a while. So take care of them until they're established. Most herbs, once they're established, will reseed themselves, come back over and over again, but you got to take care of the babies. Herb seeds routinely are so small, they look like flecks of pepper. And that's why if you look at that Tulsi that's coming around, you'll see that the plants are too close together, basically. It's because I couldn't see the seed. And so I took it, put it in my fingers and kind of did the chef thing, you know how they put their salt in like that. But I still couldn't see where they were. So not to worry, if you get too many plants coming up, you can try to divide it or you can pinch them out and thin them. But I find them the seeds hard to work with. I just don't see that well. When you put your seeds, like a Tulsi seed, which is very small, in a pot, you just sprinkle on top and then you pat your seeds very, very, very gently. All you want is seed to soil contact. They don't need to be covered. Okay, if they get down too far, their little bitty seeds are going to wear themselves out before they get to the surface, and you might not get as good a growth of seedlings as you would if you just pat them gently and speak to them gently. That's a good plant. Good plant. And then if all else fails, read the instructions. Yeah. Although sometimes I find that the tags that come with plants, they're not as accurate as I would like them to be. So, yeah, they're very generic, right? They say things like full sun. Yeah, right. Okay, so that's how you're going to plant your garden. Now, what are you going to harvest? Well, I'm a retired teacher. I don't like mornings. I tend to harvest my teas whenever I think that I might want a pot of tea. But technically, you should pick your teas first thing in the morning. Like roll out of bed, hit the herb garden, and pick your teas. They will be more flavorful because the oils that provide the flavor are more concentrated. The oils will disperse as the plant has to deal with sunshine. So get your herbs early in the morning. Wilted herbs, this is not I can show you 3 science sites that will back this up. This is something I've read about and experienced myself. If you want a really good pot of tea in the morning, pick your herbs the day before and let them sit. Just sit around in the kitchen until they wilt. For whatever reason, the wilted tea leaves, the wilted herb leaves, make a much more fragrant and tasty tea. I don't know why, but I do know it works, especially with the Tulsi. Tulsi, if you make Tulsi with fresh leaves, you get a very pale green, a nice flavor, really nice flavor. But if you make it with wilted leaves, you get a kind of a honey-colored tea that has a much more pronounced flavor. So I would strongly encourage you to pick them like 24 hours ahead. And your herbs are going to like being harvested. You pick off the little growing point, and you're going to get more out the bottom. So you'll have happier, healthier plants if you're harvesting regularly. Herbs are super easy to preserve. You can air dry them. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You can dehydrate them. This time of year, I always have a dehydrator going in my kitchen. It's either tomatoes or herbs being dried. Dehydrating them with an electric dehydrator is very quick with herbs, like a few hours. And the key to using a dehydrator successfully is don't over dry your herbs. Keep checking them. You don't want them crispy and frozen. Now, the thing about freezing herbs is this. If I put this hyssop in the freezer, looking like this, when I take it out of the freezer, it's going to look like green slime, because you know what frozen plants look like. It won't affect the tea at all. It's an aesthetics thing. You know, if you don't want to make your pot of tea with green slime, I would not suggest freezing your herbs. Drying would be better. Freezing sure is easy, though. And again, the tea is the same. I can't tell any difference in quality or flavor. I just don't like the way it looks. Yeah. And again, early morning. That's for culinary herbs or tea herbs or any herbs. Get to them before the sun gets to them. Yes, ma'am. Is it better to put it in a Ziploc or let it air? I just sit on the counter. Okay. Yeah. I think these all did pretty well in bags overnight, but I think just sitting is better, essentially. Drying your herbs, again, super easy. You go out in the morning and cut them. You try to cut them with a stem that's at least 8 inches long. You're going to bundle them together, wash them well, tie the bundle with a cotton twine. I use butcher's twine. You can buy it almost anywhere. And then hang it someplace out of the sun with good air circulation. That's how people have been preserving their herbs for thousands of years. Super easy. Now, the thing to remember is that once your herbs are dried and in the jars, one of the reasons we're doing this is because we don't want preservatives in our systems. And none of these herbal preparations are going to have preservatives in them, and therefore they won't last very long. So you want to store your dried herbs in small, maybe no more than 4 ounces in a jar or container. And if you have a number of containers, I would suggest freezing the dried herbs to maintain their pungency and freshness. Same thing with your culinary herbs. Keep it small quantities. Keep your small quantities in the freezer because they lose their oomph. Again, dehydrators work well, so do ovens. It's kind of hot right now to have your oven going all the time. Dehydrators and ovens are much faster than air drying. So it's just kind of what works for you, what your preference is. You're going to get basically the same results. There's my thing on freezing herbs. I always put this in my culinary herb talk too, because I don't know about y'all, but my basils always turn into bushes by the end of the summer. It's like, I got to save this somehow. So I froze it. I don't like it frozen. It's just a personal thing. Okay, brewing a pot of tea. We have to be very proper and precise about this. Now, the first thing you do, you start with a clean, dry teapot. Traditionally, in the English tradition, right before you put your herbs in it, you're going to want to wash your teapot with some warm water because you want a hot teapot. Then you simply put your herbs in. I strongly suggest using an electric kettle, not because it's cool, because it is very cool to have your copper electric kettle in the kitchen, but it will heat the water to the exact correct temperature for producing a proper herbal tea. That temperature is 185 degrees. You don't want your water to boil. You just want it hot enough. You just take your herbs. They should be washed, of course. You put it in your teapot. You pour your 185-degree water over, put the lid on, and in about 4 minutes, you should have a proper herbal tea that's ready to drink. Now, Tulsi. I like Tulsi to steep longer. That's a personal preference. I like the flavor. I mean, I really like the flavor. And I have been known to even let it sit overnight. A lot of people say it's bitter if it steeps that long. It's not bitter to me. I like it a lot. The other thing that I will often do with any of my herbs is add 2 or 3 discs of ginger root. I buy big chunks of ginger. I slice them into discs. I put them in a Ziploc bag, frozen in discs, and freeze them. Freezing them, you know how when a plant freezes and the cells rupture, with what makes them limp and green? It does that for the mint as well. And you can put 2 discs of mint in with your lemon balm, pour your tea over it, and have a lemon ginger tea that'll cure whatever ails you. It's just delicious. Okay. Any questions so far on this part? No? Good? Okay. Rules for combining tea herbs. There are no rules. I would suggest keeping a notebook. I have a pretty little notebook with a red cover on it, and when I make a combination, I write it down because I tend to make whatever sounds good that day. I like citrus a lot, citrus flavors. So I use a lot of lemongrass, lemon verbena, lemon balm, a lot of ginger. The Tulsi mixes well with everything. The only thing I have found so far I don't like is, as I said, sweet basil. Apparently that's in a lot of herbal teas. I don't like that flavor in tea, but I would urge you to experiment. There really are no rules. There are books out there. This has sort of been my Bible since I started working with this. I carry it around with me. It's like everywhere. It's under my arm all the time. She talks about everything I've spoken about today. Good reference to have at home. The author is Jody Helmer, and she really is writing for the layperson. Some of these other people are a lot more technical. The other person I would suggest having in your library, if you like books the way I do, is Rosemary Gladstar. Almost anything she's written. I don't think her real name is Rosemary Gladstar, but she is like the guru of herbal preparations right now. And she has, in this particular book, Nature's Remedies, there's recipes for everything. Soaps, lotions, teas, everything. Good book to have around. Also, sometimes she'll make a combination. She'll suggest a combination that I hadn't thought from. So whatever you want to do, it's good. Keep your tea notebook. I'm always getting up and thinking, boy, that tea yesterday was good. What did I put in it? And if I didn't write it down, it's lost forever. So keep your notebook, write your pots, your things down, and don't hesitate to go online. There is so much material out there on herbal teas and infusions. Just sort of immerse yourself in that culture. I find it, there's some weirdos out there. To be blunt, there's some people out there that'll tell you that ginger tea will cure liver cancer. I'm not sure about that, but take it with a grain of salt. Get out there, read, see what people are experimenting with, and give it a shot. These are my helpful hints as a new devotee of herbal teas. Fresh ginger in almost every pot. Ginger is so healing. It has wonderful medicinal properties. People have been using it forever, and it tastes good too. And it's not expensive. You can grow your own ginger. I mean, if you really want to become a purist, really get down to it, you can grow ginger. It's a beautiful plant. It just takes a lot of time, and I'd rather buy mine. Don't be afraid to experiment. Use the combination of plants you like. I am going to try the hyssop this afternoon when I get home. I know right up front, this has a very strong licorice taste, and I don't like licorice. So I'm going to put something else in it to mask the licorice taste. Probably lemon verbena. I'm going to pass this one around and let you take a leaf out and kind of bend it and crush it a little bit. It's almost more lemony than lemon. Yeah, and it's lemon verbena is not a lemon tree, and it's not a verbena plant. It's a small tree. So it's a lovely plant. Yeah. But feel free to break a leaf and take a smell of that because it's really, really neat. And then again, Rosemary Gladstar is kind of like the queen of all of these preparations, and most of her recipes are easy, pretty good. And that's pretty much it from me today. So I would be more than happy to take questions if you have questions, or if you'd like to come up and look at some of these things that are up here. I was talking to some people before class. This is tea leaves made from the coca plant in Ecuador, the same plant that is the mother plant for cocaine. And we were being tourists, and the altitude is very high, and you feel very fatigued. and they would give us cups of this tea, and it would just sort of perk you right up, and you'd feel like you could keep going again. But you don't get jittery because there's no caffeine in it. That's another beauty of the herbal teas. There is no caffeine in it. The other thing you can do, my own doctor put me on to this. She says everybody over the age of 60 should be drinking at least 1 cup of green tea every day for the medicinal properties of green tea. You can buy some loose green tea or a green tea bag and add that to your own preparations and increase the value of your own herbs. Yes, ma'am.
Tea that you were talking about, those people who are up and down those mountains, what I've read, live on those.
Yeah.
That's their
Yeah.
source of energy.
And again, this was another herb that got badly used. I mean, there's nothing essentially wrong with the tea brewed from the leaves. I found it very helpful at those high altitudes, not being accustomed to being up that high, found it very helpful. Yeah. Any more question?
What's the standard for like shelf life, or whether it's fresh or ones that you buy from?
Okay, if it's my own herbs,
Yeah.
I just go out and get them on an as-needed basis. I haven't dried much. I will be getting into that as we get closer to winter. But I personally like the 24-hour wilting process the best. Now, in terms of buying teas, I know that y'all are probably like I am. The first thing I do is find the list of ingredients. Right, now, this, if you looked at this, to me, look, I will often buy dried hibiscus blossoms because I really love hibiscus tea. I'm very excited to get my own going. But I would look at this and I would think this was a hibiscus tea, and it is not. This is from Trader Joe's. It's hibiscus, rose hips, lemongrass, peppermint, orange peel, lemon verbena, natural flavors, and wild cherry bark. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting combination, but I actually wanted just a red hibiscus tea. So I guess the answer to that is read your labels and find what works for you. Okay. Tea, this tea that's packaged like this, I have some in my pantry that's quite old. I actually brought it back from China with me. And I find it gets even though it's in a closed container, I don't like the way it tastes after a while. It gets a kind of a dusty taste to it. So again, I think that's up to a personal preference. I threw some of my red hibiscus away because I didn't like the taste. It tasted old to me. Did I answer your question?
I think.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You can add whatever you want. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You can do whatever you want with it. I tend to drink mine as iced tea. Like a lot of older people, staying hydrated is a real important thing. And I do find that if I have a pot of an herbal tea sitting on the kitchen and I keep pouring it over ice, I am much better hydrated than I used to be, simply because the tea tastes better than plain old water. And it keeps me away from the Coke Zeros. Probably a lot healthier for me then. But you can add anything to that teapot that you like. Yeah.
Do you have an email where we can reach out to you?
Yes, my email is LD lowercase CACE at satx.rr.com. Like Linda Dog, LD. Yeah.
Did you get your electric kettle on Amazon?
I did. Yeah, if Amazon doesn't come to my house one day, they send a wellness check. They have somebody come and check on me. Yeah, and it really does make a difference. You know, I mean, I hate to be picky about it, but that water being that right temperature just works beautifully well. No more questions? You covered everything? Good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I'll be happy to stick around if you want to come and sniff things and touch things and look at things.